In this video, I'm going to show you how I improved the insulation in my old Japanese house. This is something that you could do yourself, and it should cost less than $1,000 US. Did you know that old Japanese houses are freezing cold in the winter and sweltering hot in the summer? Houses were not built with modern insulation in mind. Instead, the houses were built with a focus on how to handle the hot, humid summers. They're built for breathability. The walls are thin and made of wood and paper. Shoji doors, the sliding doors with washi paper, are installed around the house and removed during the summer for better airflow. Tatami floors have been installed in older properties for more breathability. Insulation in ceiling spaces usually does not exist. This is all for better airflow, but these days, especially during the winter, it's become more difficult to deal with. Research shows that around 20 to 30% of heat loss can be through the roof, and 10 to 15% can be through the floor space. For this video, I'm focusing on two areas of insulation. One is the roof space, and the other is on the ground floor under the floor. This is because of their similarity in construction methods. Let's get started.
Happy travels!
Hey everyone, and welcome to my video. I just wanted to put another quick message up front to say thank you very much to those generous Ko-fi supporters. Ko-fi, I really appreciate it. I've been drinking too much coffee, but I'm also putting that money towards getting better equipment, more editing stuff, so I can make better quality videos and have a better outcome for my audience. Thank you very much, appreciate it. Enjoy the video. My house was built in 1967, and even till then, these houses were designed with one thing in mind for heating, and that was to heat the person rather than to heat the space. A good example of this is the kotatsu table. Under this table is a heater. This will be plugged in, it's electrical, and it keeps the person warm. You can see the heater here, and a blanket will be laid over this space and come over your legs to keep your body warm. If you watch anime, you've probably seen this before. While this is comfortable and effective to keep you warm, it doesn't keep the space warm. So you're kind of stuck just here during the winter. But these days, the approach is different, as we want to heat the space and be comfortable around the house. Another alternative to the kotatsu table was a hibachi, the ceramic grill that you could put coals in and sit around and keep warm by the fire. Another method that the older generation might have done is lift up one piece of tatami on the floor, cut a hole in the plywood under the tatami that supports it, and put hot coals under the floor space under the house. I had this in my house, and a giveaway for this is if you can see a sag in the tatami. This could have been the heating system previously. It might be hard to tell here, but there is an indent here on my floor. Right here, there's a circle. So when I lift this tatami up, you're going to see a hole under the floor. And you can see that this here are the brackets that would have held a hibachi in place, and the coal would be sitting here to heat this room. When I first lifted this up, you could see directly down onto the soil under the house. Now you can see that I've insulated there, and that's covering that hole. But I still need to level that off with something flat to avoid that sink in the tatami. And just for the sake of this video, I haven't done that yet, so I could showcase this. This is, of course, very dangerous and could easily cause a fire, especially in a house that's built out of wood and paper. Inside the roof, right here, is where we're going to go. So let's get up there and take a look. I can almost guarantee that all of the older homes along my street do not have insulation in the ceiling space. That's where we're going to get started. I know there's not going to be any, so let's get up there and sort out that insulation. Let's see what the local DIY store has for insulation. For DIY in Japan, you'll have two main options. The first option is this rigid blue board, sometimes white, that has an R rating, a heat rating, as to what insulation level that will have. And that is a rigid board. You can cut that easily to size. You can just put a groove into that with a Stanley knife and just fold that and it will snap. It fits nicely. It's really good for a new build where, for example, on a floor, you can fit that within the joists. You can put these brackets underneath that acts like feet, and that'll hold that in place when you put that in top and cut that to size. It's a little bit more difficult to install from underneath because you would have to take that board, go under the house, and that space is like this much, drag that in there, fit that in place. It's a little bit difficult and tricky to fit that. The other option would be the fiberglass sheets. That comes in rolls and you can simply just roll that out and staple that into place. And I'm talking about the floor here. The ceiling is the same thing. Think about the sheets. You've got to fit that through a narrow gap. When I say the sheets, the foam board, you've got to fit that foam board through a narrow gap, cut that to size, and then fit that in place. The pros for the foam board is that it is rigid. It's good for this kind of weather in Japan because moisture cannot be absorbed into this foam so easily. It acts as like a vapor barrier where moisture will not penetrate through that foam as easily as it would for, say, fiberglass, where fiberglass will just absorb that moisture between that condensation from, example, the soil, if we're talking about underneath the house, coming up to the house and then having a different temperature between the room in the house that might be air conditioned and the outside temperature underneath the house. You will definitely have this moisture buildup and water. They do offer this vapor barrier built into the fiberglass, which makes me lean more towards going for the fiberglass. Having a vapor barrier there will allow protection with that moisture that builds up. It will most likely be wet at some point, and then finding a better system to avoid having that moisture in the first place. So for the sake of being able to fit into the space, to be able to take these materials for insulating into a space, I'm choosing the fiberglass insulation with a vapor barrier. However, if I was building a new floor, if I was taking the floor away, I would definitely be leaning towards doing the foam rigid board, and that's the normal thing to do in Japan. Mine's a little bit not so conventional. People would usually just choose this foam, but I'm doing this for the sake of time, for ease of install, and I just want to test the capabilities of that vapor barrier. And I do plan to put down a floor vapor barrier in that space below the floor, so it should be fine with an absorbing stone to absorb the moisture. This is what I've been recommended by my termite and underfloor space consultant in Japan who deals with this as part of his job. The other pro that I like about having the fiberglass insulation with the vapor barrier is that the R rating, the heat insulation rating, is higher for this fiberglass with the vapor barrier. If I want to do the same thing with foam, the foam would need to be very thick. It would be even more difficult to climb down into the floor, get it through the small gap, take it all the way to the back of the house and fit it into place. The space that I have to work with is about this much space above my head as I'm laying on the floor. I can pull those rolls of fiberglass sheets, which are malleable, and fit that into place very easily in comparison. If this doesn't work in the long run, I'm happy to change this over when I do change the floor in the future. It will happen, but it's not on the cards now, but I want to be warm for this winter. When it comes to the ceiling space, this is very much the norm for a Western country to put in this fiberglass into the ceilings. The other option that people do is spray the fiberglass straight into the space and fill that up. And they have other alternatives to fiberglass as well, different fibers to put up there, or they'll do a spray foam. Again, this is my own DIY project. I'm trying to be economical. I'm trying to do what makes sense and what's accessible for me living where I live in Japan. If this doesn't work out, I'm happy to adjust and just learn from my experience. The important question that people are wondering, what is it going to cost to put down this fiberglass with a vapor barrier inside the roof and inside the floor? And the total cost for the roof space and the floor is about 80,000 yen, which works out to be around $400 US, $500 US. It's very affordable for me to do by myself. The only other materials that I really need for this is a stapler to fit that in and hold that into place, which it's easily attached on the sides. I can easily fit that, and the protective equipment that goes with this job to try to keep that fiberglass off of me, to keep the mud off of me, and to not get scratched up. The only other tool that I really need is a pair of scissors plus a box cutter, and that's it to install this. It's a very simple install. It doesn't take too long. It'll take me a day for each. The only challenge is that tight space and getting things up there. The biggest challenge of this little DIY project is easily the floor space. Going under the floor, where I really have this much space to crawl around and fit under there, fit that in without getting stuff in your eyes, to feel too uncomfortable. I'm doing this in summer. It's hot under there. So making sure I drink enough water, keep a dust mask on, keep my eyes covered, make sure I don't get fiberglass on my body to be as comfortable as I can. It's a bit of a tricky install, but it's not too difficult. It's just more about the environment and being uncomfortable, which is the challenge. You can grab some masks from the DIY store, and they've also got the goggles or glasses here for safety. They're pretty cheap. That LED light that I picked up is just 4,000 yen. You can choose from a variety of gloves, and they're pretty cheap as well, just to protect yourself from anything you find in the ceiling, under the floor, plus from the fiberglass. And here we have those disposable overalls. And that's kind of what I'll be wearing. 498 yen, 500 yen. The first challenge is figuring out how to get into the roof space. How do you go through the ceiling? And you'll most likely find that the entrance, the doorway, is inside one of the Japanese wardrobes. And for me, it's this one. Something else that I found really helpful was these big, powerful LED work lights. This one is adjustable, and I can put that up into that space to have a better view of the whole roof space. I use that under the floor too. I'm up in the roof space putting in insulation, and this is what I've found. Well, here it is. And as I had expected, there is absolutely zero insulation up in the roof. One of the cool things that I found while I was up here is this, which is actually related to Shintoism. It's a blessing for the house when the house was completed. This was put up here on completion of construction. It's pretty common for a house to be blessed like this in Japan. Firstly, in the beginning when you first start construction, and then second again, when construction is completed, this is a blessing to have a safe life with this house. So it's for safety for the house and everything goes right. When you look around in the roof space a little bit more, you can see how this construction method is pretty interesting, how everything's been pieced together. There are not so many nails within the roof space. It's a lot of it are these joints, which is very cool to see this traditional construction. Part of it is kind of worrying when you see everything's just kind of stacked on top of each other. The pieces of wood on top of the wood. It's very much just a tree that's been placed up here, that's been dressed and then put straight up. And as you can see, I've started to add the insulation here. That just rolled straight out. It was easy to install, put straight over the top, and that's already given me some level of insulation in my ceiling. And you have to remember as well, above that space, the roof, I'll have a lot of snow stacked up there during the winter. That actually acts as some level insulation, actually, the snow being on top. Bringing all of this material inside, putting it in the roof in that small space, and then rolling it all out across the ceiling only took around 2 hours to complete. Okay, and on to the next part of the installation, which was underneath the floor, on the ground floor. And directly below that was soil and mud. I was putting this one off for a while because I didn't want to roll around too much in the mud down there. And up there is where I will be attaching all of the new insulation that I roll out, and I'll just push it across, attach that to the joists, and use a stapler to keep that in place. And you can just see how small this crawl space is. This is actually the highest part of the crawl space. As I get further to the back, it becomes much smaller. So this is the kind of stapler you'll need: a staple gun to staple the edges of that fiberglass, or I should say the plastic vapor barrier that encases that fiber. Here's a great shot of D pushing through the fiberglass sheets with the vapor barrier encasing it, through the bearers and following the joist line. But you can see how intricate and how tight this space is to be able to fit in there and maneuver. It would be almost impossible to do this with that foam board, the rigid board. And these are a few photos, a few pickies of what it looks like now. And now you can see that plastic sheet, which is going to act as a vapor barrier. And this is directly over the soil. And I actually go back later on, I haven't made the video for this yet, but I've actually put a vapor barrier on the soil. So it's basically a plastic sheet over the soil, plus zeolite rock, which absorbs the moisture in the airspace under the floor. Once again, the weather has started to change and winter is fast approaching. I'm looking forward to seeing how effective all of this work is and will be during the winter. And as I'm already feeling some of the effects, and I felt it during the summer, I'm excited to test this out also during the winter. Beyond doing this installation, I've also done some other things that I'll capture in other videos. Stick around to see what other projects that I've been doing to help insulate my house. This is going to be an ongoing journey. I'm trying to do this in the most effective and economically efficient way that I can. This is my personal economical approach, as I don't want to overspend unnecessary money on over designing. Thank you very much for joining. Happy travels!